Hello, my beautiful friends and my fellow sparkly space blobs, transformative beings, all of us who are really longing to create and build and connect with beauty in the world and all the resilience it takes to continue exploring in this life. I am so happy to have you here. I am so grateful for these moments that we get to share together where we can alchemize and tap into some really, really powerful energy together here in this little moment. I know I need these reminders and these moments all the time, and it's so easy to belittle this kind of work right now because it will feel like it's not enough. It will feel like we're not doing enough. It'll feel like, am I just being self-centered in a world that's all about individualization and commercialization of spirituality? And I'm here to tell you that this is really, really powerful stuff. When we strip it back to its simplistic and essential roots, these moments of centering and listening in and exploring in the unconscious and exploring the way we treat ourselves and moving from that place is extremely powerful. And I know that I have so many days when I'm judging, like, is what I'm doing every day enough? Should I be finding deeper words for what's going on in the world? Because there is a lot of witnessing of the collective shadow right now appearing in the systems and in the way that we're moving through things. And it's a lot to deal with. You might also be feeling physically, emotionally, mentally like you are going through it, like you are in the wash machine of the alchemization of the world right now. And I know I am feeling that way. In fact, you can even hear in my voice, I am congested. I just got a cold. So my body was like, I can't keep up with all of this. I'm going to have to rest here and reconnect with myself a little bit. I know many of us are feeling the intensity of it all and maybe even feeling a little bit tossed and turned around and not sure where to point our compasses, what to believe in, what to hope for, what to give up on, all of those things. And I think this Leo new moon is such a powerful moment of just being able to come home to ourselves. And also, this is an alchemical catalyst moon that is helping us to unearth and intentionally connect with ingredients that have either been coalescing behind the scenes in our unconscious worlds or have been waiting there for a little while to be fully seen and are ready now to be incorporated into our process. This is also a new moon that is, like I mentioned, a catalyst. So it's going to help us to transform ideas or core beliefs we have about ourselves, our values, our culture, about what we have to do, about what the rules are, and change them into active, helpful core principles, core values that we can take with us. So this new moon not only helps us improve our relationship with ourselves by connecting and alchemizing some very important ingredients that may be dressed up as negative core beliefs or stressors, as well as connecting us to new visions of what is next. This is such a powerful one. If you've been with me for a while, you might know I'm a Leo sun, Mercury, and Mars. So Leo is a really important energy to me, and I feel very strongly about working with Leonine energy and how much it can benefit the whole world and each of us. So I'm really looking forward to creating a little bit of space here for us to just explore some deep questions together, alchemize some depth within ourselves, and play with the unconscious world of our heart and our deepest longings. So let's get into it. This Leo new moon is happening at 2 degrees of Leo, so very, very early on in our Leo season. And that is bringing us into a really deep invitation to center with this energy. And I always like to bring it back to kind of the core essential qualities of an archetype and just remember some of the gifts that each archetype can bring. And Leo, I think, might be one of the most helpful energies we can be working with right now, especially if you're feeling scattered, tired, enervated, a little discouraged, feeling a little bit like, how do I deal with this? If you're dealing with despair, overwhelm, self-judgment, if you're feeling like you aren't doing enough, all of those things, Leo can be a really, really great place to refill the well, so to speak, because this is the fixed fire sign. And I know a lot of times Leo gets put in that camp of being like the sign that likes luxury and attention, and that's all that's important. And I think that's because in pop astrology, there's this very obvious line to this idea of royalty and like fancy things because of that. But that's a very literal translation of what it means to be in a position of leadership, of fully embodying leadership. And that's what Leo energy is, right? It's leadership from the creative, leadership from the open, childlike curiosity, leadership from the unburdened inner artist. Leadership from the alchemical chamber of the heart, not just from rationally thinking through things, forcing things through, mechanizing things, ignoring emotion, but actually in really, really connecting deeply to it. And Leo is an energy that is connected to the heart chakra and the heart energetics. And in so many traditions throughout the world, the heart plays very many different roles, but often the heart is a chamber of alchemy where we transform one element into its purest form, into its next form, where we transform something from the unconscious into the conscious, where we bring together various pieces of ourselves into harmonious union and therefore leadership moving forward. Leo is also just this beautiful fixed sign energy. And fixed fire is a really interesting combo to work with because it's really about how we tend to our home hearth. What is that warm, steady blaze that's not burning down the forest like it might with some of that Aries initiation, or running wild and kind of changing things up with the mutable energy of Sagittarius, but where do we feed and nourish ourselves? How do we take care of that flame so that it's not burning us up, overwhelming our system, exhausting us, but also that it's warm enough that we feel alive, that we feel ready, that we feel courageous, that we feel we can do things, and looking for the ingredients to gather to create that steady warmth within ourselves. So these are all invitations that this new moon might be bringing into our field of vision. And like I already mentioned at the beginning of this chat, this new moon particularly is a catalyst. And it's a catalyst to help us to think of some of the core negative beliefs we might hold about ourselves, or working with the burdened artists, the burdened inner children, the burdened creative parts of ourselves that have taken on roles in our psyche and in the way we treat ourselves in the day-to-day, unburdening them, alchemizing them, and allowing these elements of ourselves to come into their full power in our bodies, in our minds, in our systems, and to fully reclaim our internal leadership. I think this is so important right now because so many messages in the world are telling us to give up on our inner leadership, feel the despair, let our systems get overrun, feel scattered to the four winds, feel confused, lose some of that spark and joy in life. And this new moon is saying, no, no, no. We need to really commit deeply to our inner leadership from the courageous place of the heart. And this is a new moon that's also highlighting the need for intentional seed planting right now that are full of our core values, our core dreams, our core ingenuity, the creativity, and the joy. And this is also a new moon that's happening right in the middle of Mercury retrograde in Leo as well, which means that we're rewriting stories about the way we talk about ourselves, about the way we talk about our work here in the world, and the way we talk about our internal leadership. So we are really getting invited here to come into our heart, come into our center, and feel this courageous resilience build in our systems. This new moon is also happening in the context of some of these planets that have shifted into new signs this year. And that's also a really interesting dynamic here as we're working with this alchemy and intentionality centering in courageous leadership from the heart. So we start with Pluto opposition. So Pluto is over in Aquarius, and this new moon is going to directly oppose Pluto. And I know many of you might be like, that sounds intimidating and a little bit intense. I personally, this just makes me feel so happy to think about working with. I love a good Aquarius Leo opposition. It helps me really see super clearly kind of the warp of my life and weaving terms, where what are the frameworks that I'm working with and what is working and what's not. And so the big question here is, where is there tension? Where is there a sense that something has tension? The thing that's important about noticing this is that this is where some of the most interesting change in alchemy is going to be occurring the rest of this year, both in our individual selves as well as in the world. So we can be exploring some of the places that feel the most tense, possibly like they have the least amount of resolution or like the least clarity, or maybe we're even feeling some despair. These are the interesting places where dynamics are going to be flipped on their head in coming months. The other part of this opposition is where we are resisting failing. And I'm putting that in quotation marks because, of course, failure is a subjective thing, and cultures really like to put that idea in various different guises and costumes. But where are we resisting failing to follow through with something? Where are we resisting the places where we know we no longer want to hold together certain identities, activities, ways of moving, ways of impressing people? Where are we afraid of that shift point of moving into new territory where maybe we do fail to follow through on something, or maybe we do fail to want something anymore, or maybe we do fail to live up to some standard that we have in our head or other people have of us? And where are we allowed to fail or dislike something? Where are we allowed to just accept that the rules no longer fit and that's just okay? This can be a really powering opposition to reflect on some of those themes, because sometimes failure, or the failure to be able to keep up with a certain level of productivity or tension or whatever it might be, is actually what is needed in order to alchemize something into the next form. And a lot of times we'll push ourselves all the way to the point where we feel like we've failed, or we've fallen down, or we've gotten sick, or we're unwell, and then we let the alchemy take place. But this can be a moment where we can look at some of those places where maybe we're allowed to give ourselves permission to just acknowledge that framework we were using is no longer connected to us. And Pluto always reminds us that the greatest treasures come when we are willing to leave the conscious, the routine, the familiar, go into the subterranean, the subconscious, stop running from ourselves, and turn around and face that ingredient that's waiting for attention. And that is one of those places of empowerment and courage and centering that we can work with as we move through this intense time. The other conversation that is going on during this new moon, with this new moon, is that this new moon in Leo is going to be trining our friends Saturn and Neptune over in Aries. And once again, this is all this early degree placement work that we are doing this year, where we are re-evaluating like everything and really thinking about what's important. Now, this is a trine, so here's where we have a little bit more of that flow with this fire energy, this initiating energy that's happening with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So where is there flow? Where are there places that just feel like light and movement? And this is a great place to reflect on where we are afraid of what is in flow, what feels like it's just a little too scary to want that thing or to connect with those ingredients. Like a sentence that I think is really interesting to explore and finish is, I'm afraid that if I just want to live in the way that feels natural to me, that... And you can finish the rest of that sentence. What are our fears around what feels in flow? What are our fears about what will happen if we actually initiate some of these new pathways that are awakening in ourselves? And that's part of courage, right? A lot of times when we're working through the heart, we are asked to be courageous. We are asked to move in paths that maybe aren't so obvious to those around us, or maybe that feel a little bit like, whoa, this is an unfamiliar territory. But that's also where some of the joy and the flow and the resonance is coming from. And this is such a beautiful new moon in general, with all of the conversations I've just mentioned, to just think about the master story we tell about ourselves and what we're allowed to do, how often we're allowed to change, what we have to keep up with, what we have to keep doing, and where we feel unworthy of allowing ourselves to move with these new waves. And also looking at those stories and recognizing them for what they are, and letting those alchemize as well into new storytelling, into new ways of discussing our existence in the world. And actually, for this new moon over on my Patreon, we're going to be doing a practice for alchemizing storytelling and ways we're talking about ourselves, and any ingredients that are coming up that are feeling a bit sticky, a bit heavy, a bit dark, a bit burdened, and letting them alchemize into the new seeds that we are going to be planting. It's going to be a really rewarding practice. It's just going to feel really good in the body. So I would highly recommend joining my Wild Dreaming community over there. We are also in the midst of working with trickster energy this July and really understanding the importance of trickster, and that when it's living in our unconscious, it can kind of be a little bit of a saboteur in our systems. And when we're really aware of how to work with trickster, how embracing and freeing that can really be. So I highly recommend joining me there. It's really affordable. I've been shuffling cards, and the first card that came out is the King of Swords. I love this. I love this so much because there is such a clarity to the King of Swords. There isn't this kind of, oh, I don't know, maybe. There's this, I see. I understand. And I think that that's one of the beautiful things about the quality of energy of this new moon. It helps us to, while doing that alchemizing and while listening to the storytelling that we might be holding within ourselves, it's helping us to see really clearly what's important, what's leading us forward, what's working, what we are absolutely going to fail at doing, and that's okay. All of those kinds of insights are coming through. And I love seeing the King of Swords as well, because when we're thinking about some of the issues we're having with injustice and cruelty and some of the really, really complicated and tough things that we are facing right now, it's nice to see that clear, upright, caring, justice-oriented energy, the Magician. What a fun combo. They almost kind of mirror each other in this interesting way. One is much more about the rational thought with the King of Swords, and one is much more about the alchemical process of being a conduit and finding our center within that conduit and the magic of that. And so I think that's really interesting too when thinking about this new moon, because on the one hand, we might be rationally thinking through our storytelling, rewriting that storytelling, getting clear on what's important, but we're also going to be intuitively working through this energy, working through some of our heavier emotions, working through some of the places where we feel hopelessness or despair or exhaustion or enervation or any of those other tougher things that we are carrying, and allowing those to alchemize into their new magical ingredient form. And this can even just be a very helpful way to use our imagination at this time. Imagining that the places where we're feeling the sickest, the most unwell, the most unsupported, the most burdened, can be the places where maybe we can offer up this idea of this magical alchemizing going on through the chamber of our heart. What gifts or insights come through? And this is not to sugarcoat, by the way, and just say, oh, all the crappy things, like just think of them as positive gifts that you get to work with. You get to have an experience in the world like this, like lucky us. Aren't we just so lucky? I'm definitely not saying that. Because I think that alchemizing isn't such a clear-cut process like that. I think what I am saying though is like in inviting in just little soft places, like if you're feeling a little bit of hopelessness or exhaustion or despair or tiredness, like allowing there to get a little curious about who's really there, who's really with us in these spaces and these places and these emotions, and allowing them to reveal many more facets than we might initially know about them. And this can be a really helpful way to work with stuff. And then we've got our Seven of Swords, which, you know what, speaking of tricksters, I just love this card right now. I think it's such an important one in the mix. So we've got three modalities of working with courage and working with the process of giving ourselves the permission to be here as we are right now. So we've got the rational, we've got the clarity, we've got the, okay, I see what I need to do, what I need to focus on. I can see here are some important ingredients to connect with and intentionally plant those seeds. Then we have the magic of the alchemy with the magician, who is a feeling conduit that allows magic through. Also, the magician is an intentional seed planter, is an intentional imaginatory figure who uses imagination as a way of creating. So this is emotional and imagination work where we are allowing the new energetic flows to move through our systems. And then we have our friend, the Seven of Swords. And there are a couple of things going on with this card, because one, this is often a card about where we feel we have to sneak around, hide ourselves, and we do not feel allowed to fully embrace what we know is starting to be true for ourselves, and where we're needing to pursue those new paths and the seeds that we're wanting to plant. We feel a little guilty about them. We feel like we have to sneak around and kind of maybe get away with it behind the scenes. Is just sitting with those questions. The other side of Seven of Swords that's really important right now, though, is this is about the stealth of understanding that sometimes we build things from the quiet, sneaky behind the scenes. So either we're doing that subconsciously, and that can be a little destructive and can be a little bit tiring, or we're doing it actively. We're working with our need to maybe go a little bit quieter for a little while, but still pursuing it, or being a little bit crafty about it and working with the materials that we have, or maybe not telling the whole world about it right away because it's important to reserve our resources. So this card can really go both ways. It can be both about the shadow of feeling our unworthiness or not allowing ourselves to pursue what we really want to and having to do it in kind of backhanded ways. And it can be about the stealth and the craftiness of understanding how and when to use our resources, especially in a time when censorship and suppression are part of this whole thing that we're moving through right now. Being smart with the way we use our energy and our resources is a really beautiful and courageous thing. So there's a lot going on with all three of those cards. I would love to hear your insights. I also want to know, like, are you physically feeling like you're needing more support, or like you are moving through a time where you don't really quite know how to engage with and connect with the world, even while you're maybe spinning 100 plates and you're going through it and you're living your days, but you're feeling a bit disconnected, or just feeling a little bit like you don't really know how to connect with the bigger picture right now. I would love to hear how this process that we're moving through collectively is affecting you and affecting your body, affecting your mentality. I know for me, it's a mix of feeling both a lot of the shadow and working very deeply with that, and feeling these moments of deeper clarity and connection. And I keep moving between those two roles, but it does take quite a bit of energy to constantly be navigating. And I really love to hear how people are working with that. And we can talk more about that in coming chats in the coming weeks. Like I mentioned, if you want help just kind of centering and you want to be in a space where we just do surrealist art practices and journaling and creation and also just centering, I highly recommend checking out my Wild Dreaming community over on Patreon. I made it get really affordable so that you can join me without feeling like burdened. And also, I just want to be able to offer that work to you. It really helps me to continue to do my work. But I love it when you are here as well. I love hearing from you. I love reading your comments and hearing about your process. It's like one of my favorite things. I have been struggling with energy, so I can't always respond to every comment, but I read them all and I love them. And also, I will see you back here very soon for our next conversation. Take such beautiful care of yourselves. I am so appreciative of getting to spend this time with you, and I'll see you very, very soon.